question, and I might be able to even elaborate on that a little bit, and if I don't, make sure I come back to it. And Deb is probably going to jump in and help me as needed. But the background, which I don't have to go into too much because Dr. Watson did that tonight, was he created, or the Kansans Can, vision and mission, and in order to accomplish their goals, one of the indicators to measure that success will be individual plans of study. And so I'm not going to go through all that because he actually did that earlier. But we are actually a little bit ahead of the game because Dr. Carlin found me in October or so and said, hey, the state board is kicking around the ideas of individualized plans of study, but regardless of what they decide, I want us to move in that direction. And at the same time, Deb was saying, hey, you know, we've had these academies in place, and we've talked to kids about having a specific plan of action, but we don't really have a good documented plan in place. And more importantly, we don't involve the parents in that process. Their senior year, often we sit down and have a senior conference, and we look at whether or not that they have met the requirements for graduation, but we don't look at the whole student. And so it really worked out well that all of this aligned at the same time. And Deb said, what can we do to make this not one more thing someone in our district has to do? Our counselors, I don't know if you remember, but we talked a while back about their caseloads are pretty amazing, and we couldn't put one more thing on their plate individually. And so we looked at the program Career Cruising. We had originally been using Kansas Career Pipeline, and did they start charging us more for that? Or,
yes, they did.
Yeah. And so we looked at cost effectiveness and the programs in general and how we could streamline this with our tech savvy district, and we chose Career Cruising. And the cost of Career Cruising currently is $3 per student at the high school level, $2 at the middle school level, and we're covering that through Perkins, correct? Or VE2? VE2 funds.
Both.
And what really worked out nicely is our technology department was able to streamline passwords and usernames and accounts through Skyward. So we already have an advisor system in place with mentoring, and we could tie those teachers into a class set and make the process more of an advisor-based process instead of a counselor-to-student-only process. So what we did is we secured Career Cruising, we got all the tech aligned, and we trained counselors at the January in-service. Then in April, oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but just a quick question along
Yes.
those lines. So will this take any pressure or workload off of counselors?
Yes, so actually the state recommends 3 different ways to implement individual plans of study. One is to offer some sort of a class in which you cover all of this stuff in a classroom setting. The other is just counselor to student, which in some small schools that works out okay. And then some is more of an advisor-based program. Garden City is doing a little bit of all those, I think, through AVID, which we have a class in which we really look at pairing students who have never gone to college before or had that opportunity. That's a more intensified class that focuses on a lot of things, but individual plans of study is part of that curriculum. And then the advisor base is going to be implemented more towards along this line next year, which I'll go over in a minute. And then still individual counselors are going to meet with students who have questions about careers and possibly set up visits to college and such. But we're going to implement, I think, a little of all 3, but primarily through our mentoring advisor-based program. Okay? So we went to a workshop in Sublette, and we took a bunch of different representative groups. Deb went, principals of the middle schools and high school went, counselor representatives of the middle, high, and alternative high school went, and I went, and we just talked about what we can do to get individual plans of study in place. And so this year already the Freshman Academy during their freshman success mentoring have, the teachers have been trained on how to use Career Cruising, and all students started that process of researching careers, doing some of the online matchmaking inventory tests and inventory tests. Now, Dana, this is where I think your question will come into play. Every year in this process, kids are going to continue to do the matchmaking and career exploration online, because their interests do change, and we don't want them to be stuck into something they shouldn't be. So this is going to be an ongoing process where career exploration starts in 7th grade and it doesn't end.
Well, and I like how they separate it out here, like career research and interest inventory.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
And it differentiates it a little bit.
Yes.
Makes more sense.
The middle schools have also started those same activities, and there are different ones for 7th and 8th grade that I'll be going through a little bit more too. But already this year during the enrollment process, they did that at the middle schools. Mark, to answer your questions, it is going to be more counselor oriented, but it's going to be done in science and social studies classrooms. So they had a large number of kids that have to take those core classes, and they'll be going in there throughout the year to do these inventories.
So some of the pressure we're experiencing was more at the high school counselor
Correct.
level, right?
Yeah,
So-
it was a lot to keep track of their credits, their social, emotional, and their career. It was a lot. Next year at Garden City High School during mentoring, next year the time will be about 25 minutes, but there will be scheduled activities during mentoring. First, at the beginning of the year, the obvious, recreate your accounts, get re-familiar with the program. But remember, now kids, freshmen, 7th and 8th, have already done this once. So every year, and if they do this monthly, it should be become very routine and a part of what they do. But they'll use mentor time to add the community service that they do, the work experience, their school activities. So their senior year, when it comes time to fill out a scholarship application, it's already compiled for them. If they want to apply for a job, their resume is literally updated continuously, hopefully about monthly at the high school level. And then these are the different things that they'll do at every level. So again, if you look, freshmen still doing matchmaker, sophomore, matchmaker, juniors, matchmaker. So they're continuously trying to find their interests or update their interests. And as they take classes that are a little more specialized, sometimes that piques a new interest or gets them on a different path, and that's okay. When Dr. Watson was talking about different careers, and I just look at my own career path: school teacher, school counselor, school principal. It's all in education, but it was a different path, and it required different education, different skill sets along the way. And one of the things that I think we have to continue on a plan of study is that it's teaching kids how to plan and stick with a plan. So even if they do change a career path or an interest, they now have the skills to make a plan and create a plan of action. When I was a counselor at Kenneth Henderson years ago, before we had technology, I remember telling kids, here's a form, and this was in 7th grade, start tracking your classes on the form, put it on your refrigerator, because your counselors may miss a credit along the way and say you didn't take that class, and you need to cross-check that at home with your parents. And I would bet nobody did that. But now it's in a system that we have tied to Skyward or student information that kids can access that, parents can access that. There's just continuous cross-checking of the plan.
Renee, you left one out. Isn't it the governor's one he was talking about?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Reach for the stars.
Left that one out. And then the alternative high school is implementing this as well. And sometimes I think they get left out of the loop in terms of plans of study. But they are really unique in that they can track through school faster if they wish, through virtual courses, face-to-face courses. And so they're now going to implement an advisor-based period in their schedule next year and do some of these same activities. And then this is what kind of the middle school plan looks like. They'll do these separate activities throughout the year in 7th and 8th grade. And if you would like at some point just to have access to career cruising, we could probably get you a password. It's, even as an adult, it's really fun to get on and just take those interest inventories. I'm going through this a little faster, but parent involvement. We're really brainstorming how we can get parents involved in this process. So it isn't just on the students, it's not just on the advisors. one thing that the middle school plans to do, they have very high attendance at their open houses at the middle school level. So they're gonna send out a sky alert saying, we're putting this plan into place. We're gonna have a special place at 7th and 8th grade open house. We want you to stop by. We're going to do a little seminar on what career cruising is and what individual plans of studies are. The high school is toying with negotiated agreement for next year allows some flexibility in 3 hours worth of parent-teacher conferences. And the individual plan of study workshop we went to said, use parent-teacher conferences as a time to meet with parents to develop these plans and make sure they have a clear understanding of what that looks like. So the high school is toying with the idea of doing something early fall with parents at their open house, but in relation to individual plans of study. I think that's the component that we often just have a disconnect with is, and I can use that, an elementary principal just said to me the other day, my son is graduating, and I feel like we don't know what we're doing when we leave. And she's educated, she's been through college, but she just is so scared for the next step in that process for her child. And that was a very big aha moment for me. I think she was talking to Deb and I about that at one point. Another thing that I was thinking about, I drove home from Kansas City yesterday, and I had my Siri map on to give me directions to get out of the city, and realized I needed gas. So of course, when you go off the path, Siri, what does she tell you to do? Turn around, make a U-turn, go here, do that. And it reminded me of career plans of study. It's okay to stop, take a break, go in a different direction. You might even have to do a detour, take a new path, and that's okay as long as you continue to follow some plan to get you to meet a goal. And I think that's where we're going with individual plans of study. The best, go ahead.
What do you do with the parents that don't attend the parent-teacher conferences and these sessions that you got to have?
Right.
How do you train those and get them involved?
We're going to have to be more diligent about that. You know, we have good turnout at the senior conferences that counselors have. And maybe if we make this as important of a step, it's going to have to evolve. And maybe starting in 7th grade will help that process. If parents are used to it, because they are more involved in that grade, then that hopefully will continue.
I know there's always going to be parents that
Right.
don't understand that, but
Yes.
you guys also got to realize that there are parents that work and can't go
Absolutely.
during after-school
Yes.
sessions and
Yeah.
teacher conferences.
Yes, and you're right, and we are gonna put this available, the information on how to access stuff on the website and those things. You're right, we need to do more.
That was when I saw that was my first thing that
Yes.
popped up. How do we get the parents that
Right.
don't go?
Yeah, I think that's just the goal of this whole process, is now instead of waiting till the senior year where it's one shot to get parents involved, we're starting in 7th grade, and hopefully we'll reach more that way.
Sounds like you got a plan. Thank you.
And then again, the best part of this whole process is that it is continuous. It's not a one-shot checklist deal. It's ongoing, it can change, it's flexible. Did I miss anything, Deb?
No, I think pretty much, I guess one of the aspects that I like about the whole career cruising is that you can change. And I know when we moved into that high school, we had a lot of parents and students concerned that we were gonna put students in an academy and they could never get out. And that's certainly not the case. We have so many electives that I wish our students would stay for 4 years and not graduate early, because the amount of electives that we have that they can explore careers or aspects of a career are tremendous. But Dana, kind of your concern, I understand that, but so many of our courses cross over, and it's just like everybody's, we start here, and you're right, I don't know what the estimate is by the time our kids are 30, how many jobs they'll have. But those skills can be learned. We had a speaker who works for National Geographic, and in high school he was a journalism major, also took photos, but he loved science. And so he took a job with the National Science Foundation, and somewhere along the way, now he's in Africa, and he's trying to save this delta area through using technology. So that's a part of his science, but he's also reporting, and he's got a camera on his droid that, or his what is not droid, a drone, there we go, that flies over the area in advance. So he's using all these skills from high school and college in the job that he has now. So many of those things do cross over, and I don't think we're ever trying to pinpoint a student, but just giving them options and choices. And so we've been talking in PLCs yesterday and today. The counselors and I are there just on career plans of study. And honestly, I think everyone's looking at this like it could be a great thing. I would like to send you a password and username so you guys could take a look at that and some directions on kind of where to go, because there are lessons there, so teachers can use that as a lesson. It's already there. There's an alignment on what we do first, second, and third. And you could, I don't know if you can go and look at some of our students, but we were looking at some of our 9th grade students and what they've done so far on their portfolio. So those are already starting to be created because of the matchmaker. So it's really starting to take place, and it's exciting really in a way that they're developing something, and some of the students have actually put in a couple of awards that they've gained this year. So the 9th graders are the ones kind of leading it because they have that freshman academy and that freshman success during mentoring, so they started it. But I certainly hope that students will look at this as a way to find out about who they are. I think it can give them a big picture or a whole picture of who they are, and not just academics, but their interests and their community service and the activities that they're in, and other passions that they might have. So one of the things about the matchmaker, there's an advanced matchmaker as well, but we have to really talk to students to be serious about it. And some are going to take it as, you know, I'll choose anything. But you know, if you want to work outside, do you really want to work in the freezing cold and in the really hot sun? And if that's the case, you know, then mark that. But if you don't want to work, you know, in 30 below weather, then maybe you might not put that as a high 5. So, you know, caution them on how they answer some of those questions. But I did it, and I did it as myself, and I was glad to see I could do something other than teach, but there was teacher too, because I love education. But I also went in as an 18-year-old who is not documented and wanting to do a trades and 2-year program, and I was able to look at colleges and technical schools in Kansas, Oklahoma, and Texas where I could still get a scholarship even though I wasn't a citizen. And that, to me, is huge for some of our students, that they can access that and they can document that and put that right in on their plan, and so they can go back to that and take a look at it. So it's a way to save things as well, information that's going to help them plan down the road. And I think the parent thing, I don't know how we're going to get the parents there that won't come, but as Dr. Watson said, we talked about that today. If we're talking about your future instead of your past, come talk about the future, your future in the high school and your future beyond, versus just here's how you did last semester on your grades. I think that has a different ring to it. It's more positive. Let's see what your kids are planning, what they're planning to do, and how are we all involved in that. And so I hope that that's the conversation that will take place when we have our conferences.
I hope I wasn't overly negative.
Oh,
No, I just wanted
It's
to answer
good.
the question because it's such a huge part of the state's way to measure goals, and I think that we're doing it the right way. And so, no, I didn't think it was negative.
Because
You're not the only one that has the question. No, it's a good question.
Right. I was an academic advisor at a community college in another life. And I always thought, gosh, these kids had explored more, or, you know, they didn't even really know where their interests were. But now the trend is like, don't ask your kid what they want to be. So I'm trying to even change my own language and then talk about interests and what problems do you want to solve, you know, those kinds of things. So that's why I brought it up, just kind of for the wording. I think it's awesome. I'm excited about it.
The other day, I'll make this short, I had a student come in and she says, I want to be a social worker. I said, okay, what do you know about being a social worker? She wants to study psychology or sociology. And she wasn't sure, she just thought that she liked her psychology class or sociology class. And so I set up 2 job shadowing days with social workers who are counselors in our school district. One at Alta Brown and one at Garfield, and I forgot what Celise is. Buffalo Jones. Okay, so she went morning with one and a different day afternoon with other, and she planned it so she wasn't missing her, you know, hard classes academically. And she came back and she said, I am so excited that I was looking at that, because now I'm looking at counselor now versus just social work. Yay, counselor. So,
Thanks, Deb.
but, yeah, but you know, that's what our kids need to do. Dr. Watson's correct. I mean, we need to have more opportunity for our students. And I took a job shadow from the Buff Project to our teachers last week during in-service to have them look over that process. So if we could instigate that next year or initiate it in some form, even if it's for a couple of class periods or a morning or an afternoon, I think it would certainly serve our students well who are really interested in doing that. So.
I had a question. So this career cruising program, that'll preserve the students' prior information that
Yes.
they've input?
Yes, it carries with them year after year, and I believe if a college has career cruising, which most of our students state, then that portfolio follows them to some post-secondary
Post-secondary, it does.
So is there any opportunity to sort of utilize that as a vehicle of the portfolio
Yes.
that colleges
Yes.
look at in
Correct.
relation to tests?
Correct, it creates that portfolio as they input all of their stuff. It helps to really generate the portfolio that they take with them. And they can take that with them digitally or create one, a physical one. Because a lot of things are like art, let's say art students, they have portfolio. They're obviously going to have some physical artifacts, but they can also digitally upload pictures, copies of awards into career cruising and make it a digital snapshot portfolio as well.
And so that'll be one of the things that we teach our high school students how to do.
Yes, yes, that's part of the process of mentoring next year.
Thank you very much. Unfinished business, going to empowering writers. Leanne, did you want to make any final comments?
Just as presented last time, we're just asking for additional time with the Empowering Writers pilot at kindergarten through sixth grade level.
Any discussion? Well, I wasn't here at the last meeting, I apologize. Someone demanded I be at this crossing over to Boy Scouts, sorry. I was very hesitant with regard to this particular program. I had heard a lot of negative things, but I've spoken to some of the people who were negative last year about it, and now that we've essentially spent the money on it, their concern was spending the money on something that they didn't necessarily think we needed at that point. They've grown to appreciate the program and think it's worth at least staying on track with. So, I'll be voting to approve it, but those were some of the concerns that I had heard from different schools was, why are we doing this? We have something that works. Why are we just getting something new to get something new, was their feeling. So, especially in this day and age of trying to cut our budget and things like that, so. Any other comments? Do I have a motion?
Just to clarify, this is a motion to
Continue the pilot.
continue the pilot.
Right.
Okay. I move we continue, we approve continuing the pilot of the Empowering Writers program.
Did you want 1 year?
We're asking for 1 year, but it will be,
We're scheduled to adopt English language arts curriculum in 2 years. This will be something that writing will be considered at that point. The alternative, if we don't continue with this, is going back to what we've had in the past. And there really is no additional cost other than any training that we might do on this. So I don't know that there's certainly if the board wants to hear about this again next year, we can. But you're going to hear about English language arts in 2 years in great detail. So it's up to you.
1 year?
1 year.
Just, All those in favor of continuing the empowering writers pilot for 1 year, please raise your hand. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, Jay, I hear a lot of stuff is going on this weekend.
There was, but I'm gonna make a request that I did not put on the last part of the agenda, because you're all bored. Danny's even going, really, I don't want to listen to you guys very much.
I'm not bored, I just don't want to go home and press. Well, it's actually board open discussion, we can be positive there.
It's actually not as bad as it could be, so that's encouraging. When we were here 2 weeks ago, we talked kind of a little bit about, I kind of gave you a history over the past few years of kind of how the revenues have changed, what we've done with expenses to kind of counteract some of those changes in revenues, and kind of gave you an overview of a potential couple options for our budget for next year. Since then, we've had a couple things happen, so I kind of just want to bring you up to speed on all of those. Shortly after we met 2 weeks ago, the state gave us their revenue estimates, and it gave us an update, and not really to anyone's surprise, we were down over what we had been expected to receive. And this is kind of a little summary of what fiscal year 2016 and 2017 look for based on their April updates. We have an increase, or excuse me, a decrease in revenue in both years, kind of offset a little bit by some legislative things that happened where they're going to be moving some money into the general fund. So the net effect of all of those things is that we're going to have a combined reduction of basically $229 million at the end of fiscal year 17. And as you can imagine, that creates a little bit of heartache for the state budget. I wanted to kind of just give you this. I thought this was an interesting slide. I stole it from KASB, so I won't say I did it. But basically, if we go back a year ago, the April estimates, that's what they said we were going to, that's what they projected for 2016 and 17 revenue. They had a slight tax increase when they did the adjustment to the state income taxes, so they thought we were going to have some increases of about $352 million and $371 million in 2017. But then they came back in November and said, wait a minute, we need to update our estimates. So you can tell the November estimates, they're below July, but they're above April. Well, that's a little bit better. But then they came back in April and adjusted them downward again. So the reduction from July is $358 million and $357 million. So even though we had a tax increase that was expected to bring about $350 million in 2016, we're only going to increase about $147 million for 2016. So relatively flat. Good news is it's an increase over the prior year, but still pretty flat. We want to go here. So the governor came and said, okay, what's that going to do to my budget? Again, another slide I stole from KASB. If you look, all we really care about is the highlighted amount here. This is what they need to do to balance their budget. For fiscal year 2016, the current year we're in, they needed to find $140 million to balance their budget, and that just gets them to a zero balance at the end of the year. For 2017, that number is $151 million. So $291 million they needed to find. So the governor came up with 3 options that he proposed. The first one is kind of what some people have called the Children's Initiative Fund route. And basically you'll notice in each one of these options, the governor's allotment is about the same. And that's the authority he has to make some changes. Again, we're going to steal from the State Highway Fund, transfer some money, I should say. We're not going to steal it. I don't think we're going to really pay it back anytime soon. And then also he had originally done a 3% reduction to universities, which was going to be about an $18 million reduction. He's carrying forward that in 2017 as well. So they'll see that in all 3 scenarios. What option 1 does is it takes the tobacco settlement money and it basically sells a portion of it. we're receiving anywhere from $50 to $55 million a year in tobacco settlement money. And this one always reminds me of the J.G. Wentworth commercials, you know, it's my money and I want it now. Basically what he has proposed to do is basically sell a portion of that future income stream. So about $10 million a year is what we would be giving up as a state, and we would sell those if we have a one-time influx of cash of about $158 million. I don't think there was a lot of support for this particular proposal, but it was the one that the governor said that he was in favor of. Option 2, the Capers option. Again, you'll see the governor's allotment is the same as it was in the past. And what this one does is it delays the Capers payment even further. The Q4 payment for Capers is about $90 million plus. And recent legislation has said we can move that into, instead of paying it in fiscal year 2016, we can pay it in fiscal year 2017. This legislation proposal would have put it off even further. We didn't have to pay it until 2018. This one didn't have a whole lot of support, primarily because since Capers, a lot of talk has been about Capers being underfunded. They're kind of in a mode of putting money back into Capers. They didn't want to slow down that process. We would like to keep putting back into Capers sooner rather than later. And that one, of course, just shifts the problem, kicks the can further down the road. Option 3 is the one that really scared me, and I think it might have caused Dr. Carlo to have a few sleepless nights. Again, the governor's allotment was the same. The legislative changes that the governor could have done was basically it spread targeted reductions across many state agencies. The one that would have hurt us was about a $57.3 million reduction to education. Now, we have no idea what that would have looked like exactly for us. I'll show you a slide in a little bit, but we think that was going to be about $900,000 to the district. And if you think we're already in May, our budget year is about over. A lot of our budget has been spent. We'll have almost $1 million cut, would be pretty significant for us. If we look at any of those 3 options, this is what the ending cash balances would have looked like for the state under each one of those scenarios. And it's kind of scary because those aren't very big numbers. And when you think about the reductions that they've had and the changes that they've had to the revenue projections, one more bad revenue projection cycle and we could wipe those out pretty quickly. And this was just the basic calculation of the $900,000. Again, we didn't really get a lot of support or ideas on how that $50-some million was going to be spread out. We just did some quick math. It took that over the number of students in the state, approximately $124 a student for us. That would equate to just a little over $900,000. Doom and gloom, always doom and gloom. The good news is, though, late last night, the House and the Senate passed bills that would, actually the House substitute for Senate Bill 249, and basically this is a little summary of what it does, and it kind of combines some aspects of each one of those options that the governor proposed. We're still going to transfer money from the state highway fund. We're going to carry forward the reductions to the universities, and we can still delay that Capers payment. But they did add 2 caveats to that. One is if revenue projections exceed, if they come in greater than what we expect them to right now, any excess would have to be put into the Capers fund. You could call it a prepayment, you could call it an early payment, whatever you want to. And then also the tobacco settlement revenues that are in excess of $42 million would have to be put into Capers. Now, we're not selling off any of those tobacco settlement funds, just the money that we received this year. The $42 million is a number that they've kind of set aside for the children's programs that are funded with the tobacco settlement money. That's kind of where that number comes from. Anything in excess of that would have to go towards the Capers payment. The provisions in this legislation basically told the governor he couldn't touch K-12 education when he makes his allocations of how he wants to reallocate dollars. Unfortunately, he could veto that part of the bill if he decides to. But it has been our indication that he does support that piece of the legislation and would not veto that portion. But again, then you just have to worry about what are the actual revenues going to do? What are these reductions actually going to save us? If everything works out the way it's supposed to, there shouldn't be any further reductions. But you always have to wonder what if. And many of these are just one-time money. We talk about one-time money all the time, so what happens next year? Again, just kicking that can down the road. Okay, I should really follow along here. And I think I pulled the wrong slide. I did, so we're gonna go back here. I wanna show you guys a slide that we talked about last time. So this is kind of where we think we're gonna be for next year. This is one option for next year, just kind of go over it a little bit. We're gonna have the increase in the block grant funding for 16-17, which is gonna be about $365,000. Based on how they're gonna recalculate state aid in the LOB, we will have a reduction of $596,000. But we will have an increase in capital outlay state aid, which again specifically for capital outlay only. We cannot use those for anything other than capital outlay supported items. The difference between the 596 and the 293,000 that hold harmless is 303,000. They're going to put that in our general fund. In order to get that full funding, the hold harmless funding, we will have to raise our local option budget. Excuse me, not our overall option, the local option budget. We will have to raise taxpayer money, local taxpayer money, to fill the void that the state left. So basically, in order to get this money, local taxpayers have to cover what the state took away from us. And all of that is going to give us about $800,000 additional. If we maintain the salary schedule for next year, it will be about $600,000. We had a little bit more, a couple positions that we added this year that will need to be added to next year's budget. We'll move some dollars around a little bit so we can take advantage of using those capital outlay dollars to offset some of our maintenance salaries. And that will leave us with about $100,000 left over, assuming everything works out in a perfect world. And that's just one option that we have for next year.
Now, again, in order to get the whole harmless funds, we have to raise locally 600,000.
Correct. If you only raise a portion of that, you'll only get a portion of the whole harmless. But you can tell by the net available funds there, that $100,000, that's a pretty slim margin for if we don't fully go after and increase local taxpayer dollars and go after that full amount of hold harmless, we'll have to be looking at some cost reductions in order to balance the budget. And as we talked about last time, we do have a list, a non-prioritized list of potential cost reductions that we could do. And if we need to go down that route, we will put a committee together, staffed with applicable stakeholders, and make sure that community members, teachers, staff, that we have representation from all groups that would be affected, because reductions that we would have to make at this point are going to be reduction in services to our students, and will definitely hit the classroom. But the good news is, right now, we didn't have to find $900,000 to complete this year's budget. So that's good news. Questions? Dr. Carlin, anything I missed?